Smile, or every banker in Monaco will know we are lying. Victor Hale said it without moving his lips as the elevator rose toward the Belle Epoque ballroom above the harbor. Amara Reed kept one gloved hand on his arm and watched their reflection in the brass doors. Victor, a 40-year-old Caucasian man in a midnight tuxedo. Controlled and unreadable, Amara, a 29-year-old African-American woman in an emerald gown. Calm enough to pass for a billionaire beside him. The fiction had been prepared in New York and polished during the flight. Amara had memorized invented vacations, charitable foundations, favorite restaurants, and the exact month when their supposed courtship became serious. Victor had memorized the same details. But she knew facts alone would not persuade people who had built fortunes by detecting hesitation. For one night, they were not an employer and the personal maid who had become his most trusted financial investigator. They were an engaged investment couple arriving to negotiate an exclusive credit agreement with the Beaumont banking family. If they succeeded, Moretti Consolidated would lose access to the private lending network that had kept its acquisitions alive. If they failed, Lorenzo Moretti would receive a $200 million revolving facility at 9 the next morning. The elevator opened to chandeliers, string music, white orchids, and a room where fortunes moved through smiles rather than signatures. Celeste Beaumont, the silver-haired chair of her family bank, greeted them beneath a painted ceiling and examined Amara before she acknowledged Victor. "You have brought the woman who reads markets as if they are faces," she said. Victor answered, "I brought the person I trust to tell me when I am wrong." It was not part of their rehearsed story, and Amara felt the truth beneath it. Celeste led them past the auction displays, wherein signed paintings and sealed donation pledges created a respectable cover for private negotiations. At each table, discreet cards marked the guests' affiliations. But Amara noticed that 3 cards used a crest from the Beaumont Credit Committee rather than the public family emblem. That seal should never have appeared outside a board packet. One of the cards rested beside Lorenzo Moretti. He greeted Victor with polished warmth and Amara with the careful attention of a man measuring a possible weakness. "Monaco makes honest people theatrical," Lorenzo said. "It makes dishonest people confident," Amara replied. Celeste almost smiled. Then she handed Amara a small ivory program. Inside, beside the final auction lot, someone had written a time in blue ink. 11:47 p.m. Amara looked toward the harbor clocks and calculated the gap. Midnight would decide the loan, but someone expected a break in Victor's alliance 13 minutes earlier. Celeste leaned close enough that only Amara could hear. "A man in this room promised me that Victor will betray you before midnight," she whispered. "I invited you because I want to see whether he is right." Amara did not ask who had made the promise. A question asked too early could reveal which fear mattered most. She closed the ivory program, thanked Celeste, and let Victor guide her into the first reception salon, where floor-to-ceiling windows turned the harbor lights into a field of floating gold. Their agreement had rules. Victor would control the legal negotiation. Amara would test every financial assumption, and neither would improvise a personal promise that the other had not approved. Yet Celeste had already forced them beyond those rules by treating their supposed engagement as collateral. She asked where Victor had proposed, what Amara disliked about him, and which account they would protect first if the Hale network suffered a liquidity shock. Victor gave the prepared location, but he answered the last question with no performance. "Her brother's restitution fund," he said. Malik Reed had not yet been publicly cleared from the Moretti banking scandal, and Victor had quietly set aside money for the depositors harmed by the false case. Amara felt both gratitude and irritation. He had used a private truth to strengthen a public lie. She answered Celeste's next question with equal precision. "I dislike that Victor confuses protection with permission." Celeste nodded as if a hidden balance sheet had finally reconciled. Across the room, a silent auction began. Guests lifted numbered paddles for paintings whose prices made little sense. But Amara noticed that several bidders withdrew at exact percentage intervals. 12%, 18%, 24%. The figures matched the interest rate ladders in the Beaumont draft facility. A bronze sculpture received an absurd bid immediately after Lorenzo checked his watch. Another bidder answered only after Celeste's secretary placed a blue folder on the piano. Amara realized the auction was not merely entertainment. It was a signaling system for lenders who wanted to coordinate without creating an obvious written record. She asked Victor to dance, using the movement to bring them near the display tables without appearing curious. The lots are tranches, she murmured. The bidders are confirming participation levels. Victor did not look toward Lorenzo. Can you prove it? Not yet. Then observe. Do not accuse. The instruction sounded reasonable, but the old power imbalance sharpened her response. You brought me because observation is not obedience. His hand loosened at her back. A small apology. When they turned, Amara saw handwritten marks beside 6 catalog numbers. The marks looked decorative until she aligned them with the percentage intervals. Together, they formed a sequence matching the internal reference format used by Hale Treasury. Someone had embedded Victor's own accounting language inside the Beaumont auction. Moretti was not only securing credit, he was making the transaction appear connected to Hale. As the music ended, Amara slipped the catalog beneath Victor's hand. The exclusive deal is already encoded, she said, and someone designed the code to make you look like its author. The first consequence arrived before they could leave the dance floor. Celeste invited them into a glass conservatory overlooking the terraces and placed a 20-page term sheet between 2 untouched cups of coffee. The Beaumont family would suspend all new credit to Moretti Consolidated for 12 months, but only if Victor supplied a complete beneficial owner ledger for every private entity under Hale control, signed a personal guarantee for potential compliance losses, and accepted an independent trustee chosen by Celeste. It was more than exclusivity. It was an inspection of the structure Victor had spent years making defensible but private. You are asking for the map of my house, he said. Celeste answered. I am asking whether the house has doors I cannot see. Victor closed the document. Amara recognized the reflex when control tightened. He withdrew information rather than negotiate its limits. She asked Celeste for the annex identifying the trustee's powers. Celeste passed it to her, and Amara found that the trustee could review transactions but could not seize assets or direct operations. The danger is not the inspection, she said. The danger is the guarantee. It makes Victor responsible for losses created by your own lending committee. Celeste's expression changed slightly. Amara had found the asymmetry. Before the discussion could continue, Lorenzo entered with the confidence of a man who expected the room to accommodate him. He claimed he had mistaken the conservatory for the library, then set a slim black packet on the table as if by accident. Its cover displayed a tiny embossed seal. Amara had seen that seal in Victor's New York archive, an obsolete Hale compliance mark retired after Malik's investigation. Lorenzo offered her a graceful exit from the fiction. You do not need to attach your future to a man who treats loyalty as an asset class, he said. Victor remained silent, allowing Amara to answer. And you do not need to pretend concern when you are pricing fear. Lorenzo smiled and left the packet behind. Celeste did not touch it. Victor did. Inside were summaries accusing Hale entities of routing funds through undeclared intermediaries. The numbers were wrong, but the format was authentic enough to survive a hurried review. More importantly, each page carried a validation code that appeared to come from Malik's old audit terminal. Victor looked at Amara, then at Celeste, who was watching them as carefully as she watched markets. If he denied the documents immediately, he would seem defensive. If he explained Malik's former access, he risked reopening the accusation against Amara's brother. Amara studied the paper under the conservatory light. The microprint around the seal contained one letter too many, a flaw that suggested a copied stamp rather than an original press. This is not evidence, she said. It is a trap built from a stolen template. Victor's face remained controlled, but his next words carried weight. The template was assigned to Malik. Amara turned toward him. And when were you planning to tell me that? Victor asked Celeste for 10 minutes and led Amara through a private corridor to their suite above the ballroom. The door closed on the music, leaving only the low sound of the harbor below. Amara placed the black packet on the desk and removed her gloves one finger at a time, a habit Victor recognized as the moment before she made a decision. You knew Malik's old terminal could be used against him, she said. Victor did not defend himself with urgency. I knew the terminal record survived. I did not know the seal had been copied. That distinction protects your conscience, not my family. He accepted the criticism. 5 years earlier, Malik had been given temporary access to a Hale compliance archive while tracing Moretti loans. When the investigation collapsed, the credential had been revoked, but an image of the terminal remained in a disaster recovery system. Viktor had sealed the system rather than destroy it because destroying evidence could later look like guilt. Amara understood the logic and still resented the silence. She photographed each page, enlarged the validation codes, and compared them with archived screenshots on Viktor's secure tablet. The forged packet carried a timestamp from 3 months after Malik's credential was revoked. That should have cleared him. But the code had been formatted to hide the date inside a checksum. Whoever made the forgery expected reviewers to recognize the terminal name and stop thinking. Viktor unlocked a private archive folder and pushed the tablet toward her. You should have had this before tonight. The folder contained the revocation order, disaster recovery logs, and an internal note showing that one unnamed executive had requested access to the old archive after Malik's departure. The request had been denied, but the denial confirmed interest. Amara looked at Viktor. You are giving me records that could expose your own failure. The failure already exists. The answer lowered the heat between them without erasing it. They returned to the ballroom in time for the second auction sequence. Celeste met them near the orchestra and asked them to join the formal dance. Because in her family, serious decisions were sometimes made while everyone else watched elegance. As Viktor and Amara moved beneath the chandeliers, Celeste spoke quietly. The Beaumont trustees received a blacklist this morning. Malik Reed appears first. Amara kept her steps even. Who submitted it? A consortium representative using Hale authentication. Viktor's jaw tightened, but he did not interrupt. Celeste continued. If the list stands, I cannot sign your exclusivity agreement. My family charter prohibits us from partnering with anyone tied to a named financial offender. Amara saw Lorenzo across the floor, speaking to 2 trustees beside the final painting. He did not look pleased or anxious. He looked certain. Then Celeste added the fact that changed the entire problem. The authentication was accepted by my own compliance office. Someone inside my bank wanted the forgery to pass. For several seconds, Amara heard only the orchestra and the soft movement of formal shoes across polished marble. The betrayal was no longer confined to Viktor's archive. It crossed both institutions, which meant Lorenzo had not built a single false document. He had built a corridor through 2 systems and expected everyone to blame the obvious people. Amara asked Celeste to show her the blacklist header. Celeste hesitated, then used her phone to display a redacted copy. The authentication code matched the obsolete Hale format, but the submission time contained a European daylight saving offset that the old New York terminal had never used. It was a small error, invisible to anyone reading for scandal rather than sequence. The file was generated here, Amara said, or by a system configured for this region. Celeste's controlled expression finally showed concern. She admitted that her family trust had indirect exposure to Moretti through legacy shipping loans. If those loans failed, the oldest branch of the Beaumont Bank could lose voting control to outside creditors. Lorenzo had not merely purchased influence. He had made the family afraid that refusing him would destroy its identity. Viktor asked what Celeste needed to suspend the facility. Proof that survives my trustees, my regulators, and my relatives, she said. Not a theory, and not a private favor. Amara looked at Viktor. He removed the archive key from his inner pocket and placed it in her hand. Full access, he said. You decide what is relevant. She understood what the gesture cost him. The key opened records that could reveal every hidden weakness of the organization, including decisions made before he took control. He was not asking her to trust him without evidence. He was giving her evidence with the power to judge him. Amara accepted the key, feeling its weight as both access and responsibility, but set a condition. No acquisition option against the Beaumont loan book. No secret benefit from their distress. Viktor's silence lasted long enough to matter. Then he admitted that his lawyers had drafted a fallback option to purchase selected loans if the exclusivity talks failed. He had seen it as protection for depositors and leverage against Moretti. But Amara saw how it could make every disclosure look self-serving. Cancel it, she said, in writing. Viktor sent the instruction before the dance ended. Celeste watched the message leave and exhaled with relief she did not try to hide. Together, they designed a provisional agreement. Beaumont would pause Moretti's facility for independent verification. Viktor would disclose the old archive, and Amara would present the authentication flaw before the trustees. It was the first moment the 3 of them acted from shared risk rather than guarded advantage. Then a waiter delivered a sealed note to Amara. Inside was a printed message bearing Victor's signature, after midnight. End the engagement and remove her access. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m. Amara did not show the note to Celeste. She asked Victor to follow her onto the terrace, where the Mediterranean air cut through the warmth of the ballroom. He read the message once and said, "It is false. Prove it without asking me to believe you." He examined the footer and pointed to the document code used by his New York office. But the code alone did not clear him. Lorenzo joined them before Victor could continue. Carrying no papers and wearing the expression of a man arriving at the conclusion he had written for someone else. He told Amara that Victor had negotiated the Beaumont fallback precisely because he expected the engagement fiction to collapse. He suggested that she could leave with her reputation intact and her brother's name removed from the blacklist if she confirmed that Victor had directed the auction signals. Amara let her face show uncertainty. It was not difficult. Victor had hidden the fallback from her, and trust did not become complete merely because he had corrected one decision. Lorenzo mistook her honesty for surrender. He explained too much. The message, he said, had been drafted in New York before your departure yesterday morning. Amara looked at the timestamp again. The footer used Monaco local time and a template updated only after their evening arrival. Lorenzo could not have known that unless he had seen the fabricated file or helped create it. She asked which Hale office had supplied the blacklist. He named an archive unit that had been dissolved 2 years earlier. Victor remained silent, allowing her to control the exchange. That restraint mattered more than a dramatic defense. Amara told Lorenzo she would consider his offer, and he returned inside, confident that the fracture had widened. When they were alone, Victor handed her his phone, already open to the sent instruction canceling the loan book option. "You were right," he said. "Protection without disclosure is another form of control." Amara wanted to accept the apology, but Celeste appeared at the terrace doors with a new problem. Her trustees had accelerated the vote. They would decide the Moretti facility in 40 minutes, before independent reviewers could arrive from Paris. Worse, Celeste's signature could delay the loan but could not defeat a 2/3 trustee majority. "They are using the gala attendance as an emergency quorum," she said. "Several trustees have already signed electronic proxies." Amara asked for the proxy metadata and received an authorized view. 3 approvals originated from the same hotel network segment, though the trustees were seated in different rooms. The manipulation was broader than pressure. Someone was routing their votes through a single controlled device. Victor looked toward the ballroom. "We expose it now." Amara closed his phone around the archive key. "Not yet. We expose the whole chain, or they will call this a technical error." She walked away from him with the false message in one hand and his deepest records in the other, unsure whether she was preserving their alliance or preparing to end it. Amara entered a small reading room beside the gallery and locked the door, not to exclude Victor permanently, but to make her next judgment without the pressure of his presence. She opened the Hale archive with the key, then compared the fake message, the blacklist code, and the auction catalog against the revocation logs. The same spacing error appeared in all 3 files, a narrow gap before every 7th character. It came from an old optical scanner used during the digitization of Victor's paper archive. Only 2 complete image sets had ever been produced. One remained in New York under sealed custody. The other had been sent years earlier to a Beaumont due diligence team during a joint shipping review. The conspiracy did not require a current Hale trader. It required someone inside the Beaumont system who knew where the forgotten copy remained. Amara called Malik through an encrypted conference line approved by Celeste. Her brother did not offer guesses. He identified the checksum structure, confirmed the revocation date, and located a contemporaneous service receipt showing that the scanner had inserted the same 7th character gap. His testimony could explain the flaw, but they still needed to connect the forged documents to Moretti. Celeste provided authorized access to beneficial owner filings for the bidders at the gala. Amara matched the bidder behind the bronze sculpture to a holding company financed by a Moretti subsidiary. The company had paid consulting fees to a dormant archival vendor 1 week before the blacklist appeared. The payment description referenced restoration services, although the vendor had no art contracts. Victor joined them only after Amara opened the door. He did not ask whether she still trusted him. He asked what evidence was missing. She showed him the chain. He added 1 piece, the canceled fallback option, time-stamped and witnessed by outside counsel. demonstrating that he had removed his own financial incentive before the investigation concluded. Together, they prepared a 5-page evidence packet with sources for every claim. Celeste arranged a secure screen in the ballroom and notified the trustees that a compliance challenge had been filed under the family charter. The orchestra continued while staff quietly shifted chairs toward the presentation area. 12 minutes remained before the vote. Amara reviewed the electronic proxies and noticed that each carried a device certificate issued to the same temporary gala tablet. Someone had not merely routed the votes through one network. Someone had copied approvals onto one machine. Celeste checked the custody log. The tablet had been signed out by a representative of the Moretti consortium. A courier receipt showed the representative had also collected a sealed envelope from the archival vendor. The chain was nearly complete. Then Celeste looked at the vote dashboard and went pale. The system marked the Moretti facility approved, scheduled for automatic release at midnight. The trustees had not yet voted in the room, but their digital decision had already been entered. Celeste stopped the orchestra and asked the guests to remain seated. The ballroom changed instantly. What had seemed like a gala became a board chamber under chandeliers. With the harbor beyond the windows and the final auction painting still waiting on its easel, Lorenzo stood near the trustees, composed but no longer relaxed. Celeste invoked the Beaumont Charter provision allowing a compliance challenge before funds were released. Amara stepped beside the screen. She did not begin with accusation. She began with time. The blacklist had been generated in Monaco using a regional offset the retired New York terminal could not produce. The false instruction ending her access used a template updated after their arrival, despite Lorenzo's claim that it existed before departure. The auction catalog, forged packet, and proxy files shared the 7th character scanner gap documented in Malik's original service receipt. Malik appeared by secure video and explained the checksum without asking the trustees to trust his memory. The revocation order and disaster recovery logs supported every statement. Amara then displayed the beneficial owner record connecting the bronze sculpture bidder to a Moretti-financed holding company. Celeste produced the archived vendor invoice and the courier custody receipt. Finally, the device certificate showed that multiple trustee proxies had been assembled on one temporary tablet signed out to the Moretti consortium. Lorenzo called the evidence circumstantial and argued that Viktor had engineered the crisis to purchase Beaumont loans cheaply. Viktor rose and placed the witnessed cancellation of his fallback option on the screen. He then made a public choice that removed the last shadow over their case. Hale Capital waives every right to acquire Beaumont assets arising from this crisis, he said. If the facility is suspended, no entity I control will profit from that suspension. The room shifted. Viktor had surrendered leverage in front of the people who measured power by retained options. Celeste asked each trustee to confirm a vote in person. 2 denied approving the electronic proxies attributed to them. A third admitted that an advisor had described the document as an attendance acknowledgement. The automatic release was frozen. The trustees then voted to suspend the Moretti facility, refer the forged materials for independent review, and enter a 12-month exclusive credit partnership with Hale Capital under enhanced disclosure rules. Lorenzo's certainty finally broke. He demanded to know whether Celeste understood what her family might lose. She answered, "Control preserved by fraud is already lost." No one threatened him. No one needed to. The verified record had removed the room beneath his argument. As compliance officers escorted him to a private interview, reporters gathered outside the ballroom doors. Celeste turned to Viktor and Amara. "The cameras expect an engaged billionaire couple," she said. "Do you continue the fiction until morning?" Viktor did not answer for Amara. He looked at her and waited. For the first time that night, the next move belonged entirely to her. Amara considered the question while the ballroom staff lowered the presentation screen and the guests began speaking in careful clusters. The false engagement had opened doors, but it had also tested the worst habits in both of them. Viktor had tried to protect outcomes by withholding choices. Amara had learned that reading people did not excuse refusing to state what she needed. They could maintain the fiction for the cameras and protect the deal from gossip. Yet doing so would make their first public act after exposing deception another deception. "We tell the truth," she said. Viktor nodded without asking which version would be safest. Celeste arranged a short statement in the gallery. Before the assembled press, She announced that Beaumont Private Bank had suspended all Moretti facilities pending independent review and had signed an exclusive, compliance-based partnership with Hale Capital. Viktor stated that he and Amara were not engaged. He described her as the strategic investigator whose work had identified the forged authentication chain and protected both institutions from a compromised vote. Amara added that the partnership would include outside oversight, whistleblower protections, and restitution safeguards for depositors affected by the earlier Moretti scheme. The truth created a smaller scandal than the lie would have created later. By dawn, the automatic loan release had been canceled, the forged blacklist had been withdrawn, and Malik's name had been removed from the Beaumont Charter Review. An independent examiner later confirmed the scanner trail, the shell company payment, and the manipulated proxies. Moretti consolidated lost access to the legacy credit network it had treated as permanent. Celeste restructured the family trust so that hidden shipping exposure could never again dictate a lending decision without disclosure. Weeks later, Viktor and Amara returned to New York, where the lights in the Hale residence seemed almost plain after Monaco. Viktor met her in the library without staff, contracts, or rehearsed roles. He offered her a new position as Director of Strategic Integrity, with authority to review his decisions and report independently to an outside committee. The salary, scope, and exit terms were written clearly. "This is work," he said. "It is not a debt, and it is not a condition for anything personal." Amara read every page before signing. Then she placed a second document on the table, one she had written herself. It contained no financial clauses. It said that trust required disclosure before protection, that either of them could pause a conversation without ending the relationship, and that neither would use public appearances to force a private promise. Viktor read it with the seriousness he gave major agreements. "I accept," he said. Their first kiss came only after the papers were closed, chosen without cameras, leverage, or invented status. Months later, when they returned to Monaco for the Beaumont Partnership Review, they entered the ballroom together again. This time no one needed them to pretend. Their love had not been secured by exclusivity, wealth, or crisis. It had become possible because each had learned to leave the other free.